Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yep. It's like a 10-second delay.
Yeah. But you could hear it going through here.
Go again.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Sorry, good.
How do you work this one? Turn it on? Oh, that's so sneaky.
It is. And then the mute button on the top.
So that's if you want to go to mute, and that's to make it live,
And why do we go to mute?
in case we're in that small group or something.
Oh, okay.
We're talking right now, and it's picking up.
Okay, just could we get settled now? Just get settled, folks, and we're going to listen to the song. And you don't. I'm afraid my teacher's training is coming out. I need 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you don't have to, you'll see the visuals, but the main thing is we take it in, okay? So we'll just start with the prayer in song form, but the words are on the back. 1, 3, 2, 1.
Teach us, O God, to discover the worth of each and everything, to be filled with awe and contemplation. Oh yeah, to see we are united with every little thing as we journey to your light. Encourage us, we pray. Work for justice, peace, love, and understanding. We thank you.
I'd like just to open up your book on page 11, and you won't see page 11, but you'll see page 10. And we're doing chapter 2 tonight, and so we're dealing with the gospel of creation. I must admit, I've very rarely read an encyclical, or even part of one. I usually waited for somebody else to summarise it and maybe explain it to some degree. But I have to say, when I got to this book, I haven't read the little booklet, but this one, and when I started reading the part on the gospel of creation, you'll see the paragraph start with I. The Pope's talking to me. Like usually they say we. And sometimes I think I'm very impressed that Pope Francis was able to present this material in what I call plain English. So I think it's really quite comprehensive and comprehensible. So when I read these ones, and I know I've got on the list that I'm reading them, but I'm going to ask, I'll read the first one, 62, and ask Mary to read 63 and 64, because I have to get ready for the next one, and I become a bit more, anyway. So you can read along with me, but of course the heading is the light offered by faith. And this tries to tie it all together with our beliefs and our faith in God. And then I read, see 62? I want to turn now to the ways in which faith can inform the dialogue for which I am calling. And the Pope's talking to me. Even though not all of whom this is addressed are believers, religion can still make a rich contribution. So I thought that another thing, when he's not saying you have to be a Catholic to understand this. Church recognises there is a world out there. And I thought, so I was really taken with that. But if I don't mind, ask Mary just to read the next two paragraphs and see how you feel about the wording.
The ecological crisis in which we find ourselves is complex, and solutions must, therefore, come from every culture and tradition, from art and poetry, as well as from spirituality. And number 64, I hope for a worldwide dialogue through this encyclical, and I hope that Christians will realize their responsibility within creation.
Yes.
You go to, I'll just go back to 0. Try just trying to see this. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
The entire material universe speaks of God's love. Soil, water, mountains, everything is, as it were, a caress. But we need only take a frank look at the facts to see that our common home is falling into serious disrepair. The earth herself, burdened and laid waste, is among the most abandoned and maltreated of our poor. These words come from Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. I feel deeply inspired and overjoyed to share them with you as the Director of Catholic Earth Care, the Australian Catholic Bishops' Ecological Agency. This message radically redefines our relationship with creation.
The Pope would like to invite us to think more profoundly about the question of God's creation, what we have done, what we are doing, how we have defaced or destroyed creation instead of cultivating it, caring for it,
In Australia, we need to face the reality of the destruction we're causing to our common home. Climate change, coal seam gas, loss of biodiversity and pollution to our waterways mean that we need to turn away from fossil fuels. We need to embrace renewable energy, and we need to live in a way that is in harmony with this beautiful part of God's creation.
And a part of the Holy Father's challenge to us is to undergo an ecological conversion. Conversion may begin with an idea, an attitude, a feeling in the heart, but it is not a true conversion until it is acted upon.
One of the central questions in Laudato Si is what kind of future are we leaving to our children and to the future generations? I think we have so much to learn from our Indigenous brothers and sisters on the planet, particularly in Australia. The gift of knowing how to live in harmony with the ecosystems around us, to not be wasteful, to not overconsume.
So I encourage all the Catholic people of Australia and any person of goodwill to take the Pope's encyclical, to read it, and then to reflect upon how you in your life, in your family, in your community, can actually take some action.
The Holy Father makes an appeal to everyone. Contribute to make our common heritage God's creation as He has made it from the beginning, which is an invitation for all of us, believers, non-believers, Catholics, non-Catholics, of whatever faith. Every human being is appealed to react.
It's not too late. If we take the time now to pause and reflect on this beautiful message in Laudato Si, together we can take the necessary steps to care for our common home.
The point there too is you've got the authority there. Bishop Kennedy is the Bishop of Armidale, but he's the senior bishop for the Catholic Bishops' Conference to deal with the environment and earth care. And the other gentleman was the Papal Nuncio, which most of you would realise is the Vatican's ambassador to Australia, the Pope's spokesperson here. So we've got authority to do what we're trying to do. Okay, so now the text, if you look at the sheet there, I'm now going to invite you to go to the circle. Now, there isn't really an item for everybody. Last week we started this side, so maybe we'll start with Helen over there, if you don't mind, Helen. And if you turn to your books, you will see we're starting on paragraph 65. You'll see they're all numbered. Look at 65. Now 68, 67 is a bit longer, but very significant 68. So, and if you don't mind, if you're welcome to read, if you don't feel comfortable, please pass. If you can read it slowly, we'd really appreciate it. So let's start with 65. Helen, you okay with that?
Human dignity rises out of the belief that we are created by God and found by Him to be good. We are made in God's image. Because we are created in love, we are capable of giving ourselves in love. Each human life is therefore valuable and unique. Each is held in God's own hand.
I'll just bring them on.
Thank God couldn't be the best in our life.
66.
Scripture helps us see that human life is grounded in three close relationships. We relate to God, to our neighbour, and to the earth itself by refusing to acknowledge that we humans have created limits and that we are not the masters of the universe. We rupture these relationships. We call this rupture by the name sin.
You can hold it because We are not God. The earth was here before us and it has been given to us. Our way of reading Genesis 1 to 28 has in the past suggested that humans have dominion over the earth, and this has been the root justification for the unbridled exploration of nature. This is not a correct interpretation of Scripture, and we reject the idea that being created in God's image gives us the right to destroy the earth. The role we have been given leads us to restore the broken relationships, end the selfishness, and turn greed into shared resources. Our role, in the end, is to till, keep, and protect the earth.
Now, there's almost an issue of theology there. See, I think the fourth last line, and it says, no, it's a bit further up. It's further up, it's halfway. This is not a correct interpretation. Now, the Pope's speaking to us. Bit of a change in theology here. He's saying this is not a correct interpretation of Scripture, that we dominate or have dominion over the earth. What he's saying is we reject that idea that being created in God's image gives us the right to destroy the earth. The role we have been given leads us to restore broken relationships, end the selfishness, and turn greed into shared resources. And Chris, would you do 69, please?
We humans, according to the Bible, must take our place within creation, not stand outside it in a superior position. It is a distorted view of human life that claims we are better or more important than the rest of creation. The Catechism teaches that each created animal or plant reflects the face of God.
70.
I'll pass.
Oh, you pass. Would you like to read 70, Josh? No, it's...
The ancient biblical stories illustrate what happens when our relationships are out of balance. After Cain had killed his brother, Abel, he was cursed from the ground. When our relationships are out of whack in one area, all other areas also suffer. In the story of Noah, we see the restoration of the world to order, showing once again how interconnected our relationships are.
The prophets time and again remind us that God the Creator is also the God whose tender mercy constantly saved us from our own selfishness and sin. Indeed, even in times of spiritual crisis, deeper faith emerged because of God's mercy. If we trust in God now to save us and follow the pathway set before us, we will overcome evil and injustice.
And if we fail to make God central like this, then we risk thinking that we are God, which leads to thinking that we can trample creation underfoot. But God alone owns the world, and we are the ones chosen to tend and keep this earthly garden.
Okay, now on the running sheet there, you'll see that I'm now going to ask you to, in your current seats, if in a moment you'll turn to the person beside you, And I'm asking you, first of all, to read paragraphs 76 to 83. So if you can put your fingers on that, you'll find it's the mystery of the universe. 76 to 83. If you would then read that quietly to yourself, and then the person beside you, there's two questions there, and you can read them. It's a reflection, there's the reading, and the discussion using the two questions. Now, I've put 15 minutes there, so I would hope that you may be able to manage that. So if someone just keep an eye on it. That's roughly 7 minutes each, but I don't mind if you do 3 and whatever the rest is. Remember, I was only in primary school, so that's 12, isn't it? So you got to choose your distance, but could you then just quietly now read 76 to 83, and then turn to a person beside you and discuss. Thank you. For those of you who are on the live streaming with us, I'll read the passages for you. It gives you a feeling of participation. The heading is the mystery of the universe. We distinguish between creation, which includes all that God has made, as an act of love, and nature, which is the system of natural life that can be studied and understood scientifically. Creation is of the order of love. It flows from God's own heart and not from chaos. Thus, every single element of creation is loved by God. We meet God in creation. Unit 78. The myth of unlimited material progress is replaced now by an understanding that we humans must serve as guardians and caretakers of nature in all its fragility. 79. The drama and excitement of human history results from our human freedom to choose a pathway on which nature is protected, or to choose one on which it is abused and exploited. The work of the Church is to encourage the former. 80. And yet, God can also bring good out of our bad choices. Creation thus continues to unfold in front of us as God continues to fill the universe with possibilities. 81. We humans are unique in creation. Each of us has an identity and is an individual centre of initiative. We can speak with God and with each other. We are creative, artistic, and intelligent. Clearly, we share in God's divine life. 82. But this does not mean that other living beings are mere objects subject to our domination. Nature cannot be viewed merely as a profit source. This has led to exploitation. Instead, we are to be seen as servants of nature, here to guard and protect it. 83. The bottom line is that the ultimate purpose of non-human creation is not found in us humans. It is found only in God, in harmony and balance, in community and peace. Our reflection here and the discussion, or we give some thought to, you might like, says here, the Pope is saying that humans do not have a unilateral power to exploit and use up the world's resources. And you're asked, do you think, contemplate, what your view on this particular point? Have a think about that. The other question to think about is, in what ways does God speak to you through nature? You might like to take some time to think about your own experience. I'll leave that with you for a few minutes. Another reflection or discussion point could be taken from those points. If the ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us, how do we and other creatures fit into God's plan? You might like to have a think about that. How do we and other creatures fit into God's plan? Another discussion point is, in what ways can we use our human intelligence and our capacity for love to care for all God's creation? To care for all God's creation, the earth and all its creatures. I'll leave those thoughts with you. And thank you very much for joining us here in Cronulla today at a Lenten group workshop on the Pope's Encyclical. Is that on? Testing, is that right? Okay, so we just have a little bit of feedback from the discussion. Would someone like just to, and they've got to be, I know they've got to be brief and to the point. Would someone just like to make a comment about how they reacted to those points from 76 to 83? Someone like to say something? There was lots of discussion going on. Come on, just a thought that you had.
Yeah, I suppose the thought was about materialism in the world today, and and looking at, people just want more and more and more. But it's easy to look out and not look in, and maybe look at the little things that I'm doing in my life that that I could do differently. Yeah.
Would you like something thoughtful from your wonderful discussion? Can we just?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying.
I'll come back.
We're just talking about the importance of looking beyond ourselves. We've all got our own selfish sort of way of living, that we want to have all that life offers, what you're talking about. But we've got to look beyond ourselves and realise the impact of our life on others, not just other human beings, but on the earth, the planet, the weather, the climate, the flora, the fauna. All of our activity has an impact on all of creation. We've got to consider that.
Okay, and there is a point there about how we use our human intelligence and our capacity to do this, and most of us realise that there is something we could do.
We noted how this, in a way, is a radical change for many of us, that we've been brought up with the idea that the environment was here for us, that it was here to provide us with food, to provide us with the resources for shelter. And now we can see that it's being part of God's creation, that God shows himself to us through creation, through nature, and that we now have a responsibility to protect that. And nature is in multi-dimensions of our life in terms of the environment, the air we breathe, our living spaces, where we work, and so on, the cars that we drive.
So really, we're totally dependent. Anyone here? Okay, all right. Yes.
I think one of the great things about this is the major shift in mentality within the Catholic Church, between one in which, and it's only a few years back, I would continuously hear from very Catholics who are very faithful that everything was here for us. And so if we relate it to the days of colonisation, the modus operandi was the world, the non-Christian world, was there to be exploited, and this was God's instructions to us. So it's quite marvellous to see this change in reflection on where we really do fit in the world.
Yeah, I had the thought about, when we say the Lord's Prayer, on earth as it is in heaven, and I have heard people use the expression, why shouldn't it be peace on earth, and why shouldn't heaven be on earth if we do the right thing? The traditional concept of the church over hundreds of years was to get salvation, which is in another place. Whereas I think what we're being told now is we should be making part, to get to salvation should be to be protecting what we've got here on earth, and the way we show love to other people, other creatures, and other parts of the environment. Okay, thank you. Franciscan is giving you a talk about just a bit this setup here. What's interesting with this is that the Franciscans actually have a website, Catholics in Focus. Would you mind just going to the screen, and I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. Try and get them in order, but please listen if the lips and that don't correspond exactly. Okay, So this is for why care for the environment, and it's the explanation. It does cover chapter 1, very briefly what we did last week, then it covers chapter 2, which is what we're doing tonight. But there's a bit of an introduction. So 3, 2, 1.
Francis promulgated Laudato Si on care for our common home, the first ever encyclical devoted to the environment, leaving many Christians with the same question: why care about the environment? More importantly, why waste time on a document about the environment when human beings face far more important issues? For Francis, the answer is simple. We are all interconnected. Exploiting God's creation for short-term profit doesn't just hurt the trees or rivers, it hurts human life, particularly the poor and vulnerable. For this reason, Laudato Si is a landmark work of church teaching that brings together science, theology, and social action to deal with much more than just the environment. It seeks to create an integral ecology in which all that is sacred is considered and cherished. What does the document say, and why is it important for every person on earth? This is Catholicism in Focus. For those whose medieval Umbrian is a bit rusty, the title Laudato Si comes from the famous Canticle of the Creatures by St. Francis of Assisi, Laudato Si mi Signore, praise be to you, my Lord. You really have to read the primary texts in their original languages, is something my professors used to say. This literary allusion gives insight to Pope Francis's mindset. We must be like the saint who saw all of God's creatures, not in regards to their utility, but as ends in themselves, giving praise to God by their very existence. Personifying the earth as sister, just as St. Francis did, Pope Francis writes in his introduction, "This sister now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. We have come to see ourselves as her lords and master, entitled to plunder her at will. As a result, we as a human species have committed many sins against nature, against God, and against one another, greedily consuming more than we need, wasting precious resources meant for the good of all." In the opening chapter of the encyclical, he addresses many of them by name: atmospheric pollutants, dangerous residues, increased global temperatures, sea level rise, extreme weather events, contaminated water, scarcity of water, the acidification of soil and water, deforestation, extinctions of thousands of species, overfishing, erosion of coral reefs, and the overall loss of biodiversity, to name just a few. But of course, as Francis writes, human beings too are creatures of this world, and so widespread environmental degradation doesn't just hurt natural resources. It hurts human life as well. Cities have grown unruly in many areas. They are inefficiently run, filled with pollution, and leave its citizens crowded in a world of cement and asphalt. Those who have relied for generations on the fruits of the environment, people like fishers and farmers, are finding it more difficult to support themselves. In areas where precious metals or oil is found, locals are often exploited by multinational corporations, even expelled from their own lands. The poor are forced to live where pollution is high and environmental disasters are frequent. This is a far cry from what Pope Francis calls the gospel of creation. In chapter 2 of his letter, he looks to the biblical accounts of creation, the Judeo-Christian approach to the mystery of the universe, the life of Jesus, and the social tradition of the Catholic Church to teach an invaluable truth. We are meant to be among and for creation as its caretaker, not above it as its Lord. Humanity was never given unlimited authority to do whatever it pleased with the earth. Amassing excess private property at the expense of others is not the will of God. The earth is a gift meant for all, to be cared for by all, meaning that the resources of the earth must be shared equitably, but also that the resources of the earth should be properly respected in their own right. There is a dignity to creation beyond what it can do for us. The ultimate destiny of the universe is in the fullness of God. The ultimate purpose of other creatures is not to be found in us. Rather, all creatures are moving forward with us and through us towards a common point of arrival, which is God, in that transcendent fullness where the risen Christ embraces and illumines all things. Human beings, endowed with intelligence and love, and drawn by the fullness of Christ, are called to lead all creatures back to their Creator. Again, you can see why he invokes St. Francis's Canticle of the Creatures. We are meant to see all of creation as our brothers and sisters, as beings in relationship with God. Unfortunately, this is not even remotely close to true in our world. Why is that? In chapter 3, Francis gets behind the individual problems to identify the philosophical flaws that inform them. He identifies two root issues. The first is that we have adopted a
Okay, thank you. So there's a good background for you to give you another perspective, Franciscan perspective. Okay, so let's look at the sheet this time. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is have a slightly larger group, and you can mix around. Maybe we could get one at this end, and maybe one over here and one over there, okay? Maybe one or two people might switch so that the numbers are a bit similar. And if you would form a group. Now, I've given you 2 minutes to select, ask someone to volunteer, just to, I've written there isn't a lot, but we need to watch the time. We want to finish by 8:10 because Philip is going to give us a closing hymn of prayer. And we want to try and encourage everybody. So the job as a group leader is simply to encourage the group to cover each of the questions that are on the white sheet and encourage everyone to participate, invite people to join in. So I'm going to ask you in a moment to form the group, and then the question one, now read silently. Well, the section I've actually put on there, so you don't have to keep running back to your book, but then you've got to read 92 silently and then discuss it. It's very important that we look at that concept of interconnectedness. Really, that's the Pope's concept with this encyclical. And I'm asking you, is this a new theology also? And the last one, well, the reference to the Colossians, chapter 1, verse 16, is there on the sheet for you, just in case you didn't bring your Bible with you tonight, okay? So, would you like to do that? So, if we could have 3 groups. You just turn your chairs around, and let's see the time. So you need to finish, get after 5. You've got really, instead of 20 minutes, we've probably got about 17. So if you could form a group.
Are you in our group, or you just want...
Well, I've got to keep an eye on. And the questions, as I said, are on the sheet. So what I do is I read the questions to the people watching. So we're starting now. It's 9 minutes to 8. Okay, the leader, you've picked a leader or just a person to help. Okay, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Thanks everybody. You're reading quietly. Read 67, but it is on your sheet. Having some quiet reading time. Item 67 I'll read to you. It quotes the Pope, says, "We humans, according to the Bible, must take our place within creation, not stand outside in a superior position. It is a distorted view of human life that claims we are better or more important than the rest of creation." Now, how does this relate with you when Genesis chapter 1 verse 28 grants humankind domination over the earth? What do you feel about that? I'd like to take that quietly and think about that. I'll just read it again. We humans, according to the Bible, must take our place within creation, not stand outside it in a superior position. It is a distorted view of the human life that claims we are better or more important than the rest of creation. Remember, creation, it's God's creation, the total. Just leave that with you for a moment. I'm now going to read 92, Unit 92 in the Encyclical. And 92 reads, the heading is a universal communion. We must embrace a universal communion. How we treat creation is how we treat each other. And the Pope says it again. He says it again. Everything is interconnected, and we are on a wonderful pilgrimage, bonded with other creatures and moving toward God. The question here is this a new theology? Have you thought of it in this way before? Have we thought of it in this way before? Have our communities, our local government, our governments, our state governments, our Commonwealth governments, the world, the United Nations, all the countries of the world, are we looking at this from a perspective that says, and I'll repeat 92, we must embrace a universal communion. How we treat creation is how we treat each other. I say it again, everything is interconnected, and we are on a wonderful pilgrimage, bonded with our creatures, with other creatures, and moving toward God. I'll let that rest with you for a moment. Do you see this as a new theology or a new way for us to look at this? The other item for the discussion groups is this. In Christ, all things in nature hang together. This is item 99. The Pope says, in Christ, all things in nature hang together, as Colossians in chapter 1, verse 16 reminds us. And I'm quoting now from the letter of St. Paul to the Colossians, chapter 1, verse 16. For through him, Christ, God created everything in heaven and on earth, the seen and the unseen things, including spiritual powers, lords, rulers, and authorities. God created the whole universe through him and for him. That's from the New Testament. And the question we could ask ourselves is, how can Jesus' life and teaching inspire us to love and care for our planet? And now we need to reflect on those elements of Jesus' life. How can Jesus' life and teaching inspire us to love and care for our planet? He, of course, showed great love to the people that he came in contact with, in the sense of making many people well, making them feel important, and in many cases the people set aside were the ones that he considered most important. He, of course, Joseph was a carpenter, and they, of course, lived in an area where there was a lot of nature's wonders. I'll just leave that with you. How can Jesus' life and teaching inspire us, or myself, to love and care for our planet? Okay, guys, but 1 minute. And maybe the leader doesn't have to respond, but maybe somebody from the group might just like to maybe there's 3 questions and there's 3 groups. Maybe we do it that way, okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you, groups. Thank you, everybody. There's three questions. So we might start with this group. Someone in this group might like to give a bit brief response to question number 1, which was the read 69 about we humans according to the Bible. Would someone like to just a thought? It could be a word, one word, or a thought. Folks, if you could just turn your chairs around and you can listen. This group will respond to question 1, this group will respond to question 2, and this group respond to question 3, okay? They can just be an individual word, a thought, doesn't have to be a long introduction, okay? So 1, 2, 3, and we've only got 3 minutes, so you get 1 minute each, okay? So
on question 1, we're interested in what Genesis had to say. So we looked that up, and basically it suggests that we rule over, but as the key point. So what does rule over mean? And then we talked about where we came from and where we're going to, and it's really only been in the last 30 or 40 years that we have had the capacity to change nature to such an extent that we have to actually show some restraint. And that hasn't really happened before. For the thousands of years before that, nature in a large way ruled human beings. We haven't had famines in Australia, we have penicillin, the whole range of things makes the world in which we live today where we have to show restraint and look at things in a different way to what our previous forebears had to.
Okay, thank you. It said there, it's a distorted view of human life that claims we are better or more important than the rest of humankind. It's group 2. Would someone here like to? Just a thought. Any individual words, ideas?
So we talked about the word in this one is about interconnectiveness and how rather than seeing ourselves separate to the world, to the environment, the ecosystems, that we're an integral part of it, and our behaviour impacts on the ecosystems that we're a part of, our environment, our local ecosystems, communities, and we impact on it, and it impacts on us, and we need to see ourselves interconnected with that and take some responsibility to care for it. Don't see ourselves as above it and separate to it.
Okay, and our group over here, somebody would like to say something? Just one of the thoughts from what you, the question 3, which is, how was Jesus' life and teaching inspire us to love and care for family? Something in Jesus' life you would remember where he showed care and
just total respect and love and humility.
right, respect for Ren, wasn't
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all very much. I hope you found that useful. And like I said, the document and the booklet. If for stage 3, you might try during the week to have a quick glance at it. Thank you for all your contributions. I do appreciate it. And secondly, down the bottom of that sheet. Now, it's not necessarily political. It just happens that our federal member also happens to be our Prime Minister. But there is an international multi-faith day for climate. It's global, and there is a representation of ARC, which is the Australian Religious Australian Religious Response to Climate Change, which is an interdenominational grouping, and I know we're going to have a few people there, so 11 o'clock Thursday of next week on the 11th of March outside the electoral office for our Federal Member of Parliament, just happens to be the Prime Minister, and at Cronulla Mall. So if you'd like to come along, and that's what we're on about here. We're trying to get our governments, our people, our communities, our church, everything to start to see what Pope Francis is on about. And it is these things. So I think we should support that on the basis of that's what Pope Francis would say we should do. Now, I know it's daytime, so you have to work out whether that's appropriate. And we're going to conclude tonight with a hymn, prayer. Brother Philip's going to do that for us. Thank you very much. And God bless you all, and thank you for coming.
In the forest, come play in the field, and sing to the glory of the Lord. Praise to the fire who gives us his light, the warmth of the sun to brighten our night. He dances with joy, his spirit so bright, he sings of you. Are telling the glory of God, and all creation is shouting for joy. Come dance in the forest, come play in the field, and sing to the glory